I've always found this fascinating. I find you can go back to the Bible for a lifetime and keep finding new layers in it.
A lot of people's perceptions are that the Bible may have been written in real time. In other words, somebody was following around Jesus and writing everything down, following Moses around and writing everything down in real time. What is your understanding through teaching that how this information was actually recorded for the parts that weren't remixed from ancient tablets and texts? How is it possible that people can be there to gather this information in real time?
Well, we do have some clues that we're not always looking at real-time reportage. So if we go back to the Old Testament, for instance, to the Hebrew scriptures, you'll find the name Yahweh, which became the Jewish name for God, although in my books I argue that's not what Yahweh meant in the beginning, that Yahweh was a particular individual, was an entity. And the name Yahweh appears very early in the Bible. It's there in Genesis 3 with the story of the fall, for instance, what Christians call the fall. And you might want to pause and say, wait a minute, this name wasn't revealed until the time of Moses. So that's ages after the action that's being described here. So how's the name in here? Mm-hmm. And what I love is that the Hebrew scriptures are very open. We are being shown that a writer after the time of Moses is retelling an older story, and so has imported the later name into the older text. We can see what the older word was that it's replacing because the writer has left it there. And it's Elohim, which means the powerful ones. So the Bible is very honest, saying originally this was a story about the powerful ones, but we who believe in Yahweh are retelling the story. So that's one example. It tells you straight away, okay, this is not real time. And another example would be you get into Genesis 6 with the story of the flood. And I would encourage anybody to read Genesis 6 alongside the various Mesopotamian flood stories, and you'll find so many correlations, it'll blow your hat off. Mm-hmm. But in the biblical telling of Noah's preparation, it becomes clear that there are two flood stories that have been woven together to make the one. Just follow the maths, you'll be able to see that. And that one of those tellings has been written after the giving of the Yahweh's laws, again, from an age far into the future. Mm-hmm. So when you start reading about clean and unclean animals in Genesis 6, again, we're being told openly, all right, somebody after the time of Moses is retelling an earlier story. That's why we're talking about clean and unclean animals.
Right.
So from the get-go, the Bible is very honest that there has been redaction and retelling that has gone on. And there are points when the Bible itself points to other sources. And it says, well, you can read the longer version of this story in such and such a book. And it's a book that you and I would have never heard of. Mm-hmm. So the Bible has evolved, has been redacted. Some of the story of that is there. If you get later into the book of Jeremiah and the books of 1 or 2 Kings, the book of Ezra, a little bit of the reworking and recrafting of the Bible is referenced in those texts. And so that's just one example that takes you beyond this fundamentalist reading of the Bible, as if you're reading science or as if you're reading a history book. You're not. You're reading another kind of literature. If you get into 1 or 2 Kings, for instance, or 1 or 2 Chronicles, again, you realize there's another reason this is being written, because you're getting action and then you're getting evaluation of that action. King such and such was a bad king because he did such and such. Oh, okay, so we now got an evaluation layered on top of history. Or in the book of Jeremiah, Jeremiah talks about the cult of Asherah, that on every high hill and under every green tree, the Jewish people would honor Asherah for having come in the past and taught their people agriculture, raising them from a life of subsistence, becoming civilization builders. He's given us all that information, and you might think, oh, wow, isn't that amazing? I wonder who she is. But then he sort of adds the sentence, isn't that awful? Isn't that idolatrous? Yeah. Oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't be interested. And there's the message, there's the agenda of that text. So you've got a blend of all sorts of things going on. You've got some history in there, but you've got some theology, you've got some moralizing, and you've got a lot of, so toe the line, this is the line.
Gotcha. So you said something interesting too. You said Elohim, right? The powerful ones. So that sounds plural to me. So this Elohim seems to be plural, multiple beings.
Yes, that's right. So Elohim is a masculine plural form word. It is a word that many Bibles translate as God, but in my books, Escaping from Eden and the Eden Conspiracy, I argue that that is not the right way to translate that word, and that if you read it in the plural, you will begin to recognize that you're reading the summary forms of the Enuma stories, the Anunnaki stories. It boils down to the fact that the Elohim word in Hebrew is the Hebrew word for Anunnaki. So it confuses people because it gets translated as God, but in other places, Elohim can be false gods. What are they, you might ask? Can be angels, can be landlords. It has this great elasticity to it. Sometimes it takes singular verbs, sometimes it takes plural verbs. So in Genesis 20, for instance, Abraham is making reference to the fact that the Elohim, plural, told me, plural verb, to move. And so that's why he moved from the high place of Haldi, because the Elohim, plural, told him, plural, to do so. There are other moments, though, where it is used in the singular. So there's a story where Yahweh, who is one of the Elohim, this is clear in a number of places. Joshua 24, for instance, Joshua says, consider who you're going to serve, the Elohim of the Egyptians, the Elohim of Mesopotamia, or our Elohim Yahweh. They're all the same kind of being. They're all referred to in the plural, even as singular entities. So it's a very odd kind of word. But the plurality is there in the verbs, it's in the behavior, because the Elohim go to war against one another, and thousands of human beings are slaughtered in the conflict between them. They're referred to collectively as the Tseva Hashemayim, which recalls how they arrived. They're the airborne armies, and they're referred to as the governing force, the El Ba'adat, the power council. But there's a moment where Yahweh refers to himself as an Elohim. There's a moment where his king, Ahaziah, has fallen off a ladder and broken his back, and he wants to know if he's going to live. And he's heard that the Elohim in Ekron down the road is very good at medical prognostics. So he sends some people to inquire of the Elohim of Ekron, does he think I can get better? And according to the prophet Elijah, when Yahweh hears about this, he's absolutely furious. And he says, is there no Elohim here? Pointing to himself. That Ahaziah has to dance off to the Elohim of Ekron, and then he makes a pun out of his name to try and put the other Elohim down. But there you can see, oh, okay, they're rivals. Yahweh is the Elohim here, and this other one, the Lord of the Flies, as he calls him, his real name is the Lord and Prince, if you say it properly, he's the Elohim in Ekron. And so Yahweh has these peers among the Elohim, which is why when you get to the 10 Commandments, he says, I don't want you working for any other Elohim. You're not to bow down to them, and you're not to serve them. And of course, in that moment, we're not supposed to ask, Sorry, who? Who
Yeah.
are you talking about?
Right.
But clearly the Bible is, as you rightly say, Billy, full of a plurality of beings, these Elohim, of whom Yahweh is one. And you go to Psalm 82, Deuteronomy 32, you find out he is a junior Elohim. Because when the lands are carved up, and each Elohim, or Elohe is the singular, which does crop up from time to time, each one of them is given land. That means they own the resources under the land, they own the people on the land.
Yep.
Yahweh gets a people group with no land. No land, no resources. So he's going to have to go to war with other Elohim in order to get land and resources. And until you realize that, all the battles of the Old Testament make no sense at all. And they make no sense if you think Yahweh means the creative source of the cosmos. Why on earth would God need to go to war with these other little beings, whoever they are, and involve human? It doesn't make sense until you realize plural Elohim, of whom Yahweh is one.
Absolute facts. And right behind me are the Elohim of ancient Kemet, now known as Egypt. On the walls of this temple, you see some of what the ancient Kemetian people called the Netiru. And the Netiru came at the time of Zep Tepi, when the gods came from heaven to earth and turned mud into a kingdom. And at some point, they all went to war, just like you stated in the book of Deuteronomy.
I want to mention, and we would talk about external corroboration, but this is really interesting. I mentioned how Jeremiah, 1 and 2 Kings, Ezra talk about this narrative shift where Judaism becomes monotheism, and we have to forget all the other Elohim. So all the temples to Milcom, Dagon, Asherah, they have to be demolished. The altars have to be broken. The figurines of Asherah have to be broken so they can't be used in harvest festivals. Those priesthoods, which were Jewish priesthoods, set up by Jewish kings, had to be disbanded or slaughtered. And now we've just got this much simpler world where there is one God, Yahweh, and one king, and one high priest, and one temple in Jerusalem. All your tithes are going to go to that. So this narrative shift happens, this reform happens. It begins with a ritual reform, and then the scriptures themselves are put together and redacted into what we would know today.
Yeah.
Just this year in Jerusalem, we found an object from a moment just before all those reforms started taking place. And this was a seal that belonged to a senior Jewish figure called Yehoezer. So this is a seal that he's going to use to certify documents, to seal letters, to put his imprimatur on things. Very, very important item to him that really stands for his authority and his integrity. Senior Jewish figure. What's the picture on that seal? It's an Assyrian Dingir, or genie, or Anunnaki.
Yeah.
You know, the classic winged Anunnaki. He saw no conflict between his worldview and having an Anunnaki on his ring for his seal. Because at that time, Judaism still spoke about the Elohim, still remembered the Tseva Hashemayim, still remembered what they looked like, because the Jerusalem temple hadn't been defaced so you could no longer see images of them. The Nehushtan hadn't been confiscated so you could no longer see what Yahweh looked like. And in their minds, the Elohim of Judaism were all part of this wider family of stories of Elohim, Tingir, Anunnaki, Anuna. There was no conflict.
Right.
And that is a real object discovered just this year to tell you that Judaism was something different before these ritual and narrative changes were brought in.
Right. Absolutely. That's just incredible.
And then you see that object, you're going to go back and you're going to read the Bible differently.
Yeah, I want to see this thing again. We're going to superimpose it over this video. It's just incredible. I remember reading in the Old Testament, it said they came across the Anak, and we were grasshoppers in their eyesight. So a reference there to some really big people, and they call them the Anunnaki, which I thought was interesting, since the ancient texts talk about the Anunnaki and the Anuna. It seems like there's references of these beings as many different names all around the world.
That's right. I mean, in the plural, they're referred to as the Anakim, which sounds strangely like Anunnaki.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got Anak and the Anactorians in another part of the world. You've got Anak with a Q in the Muslim tradition. And the idea of there being much bigger people living in the world does repeat all around the world. It seems to be a bit of a taboo these days to talk about giants or people who are much, much bigger in the past. Mm-hmm. I don't know why it's become a taboo. It wasn't in the 19th century when we were digging up giant finds, and it wasn't. If you go to Josephus, he's completely unembarrassed by these stories, and he says in his writing, the Greek legends of the Titans, that's really their version of our memories of people like the Anakim. Mm-hmm. And the men of renown produced through hybridization in Genesis 6. Mm-hmm. So Josephus saw these stories as referring to real cultural memory of sharing the planet with much bigger people. Mm-hmm. And I wonder also if there are memories of the time when we did share the planet with the Gigantopithecus and with the Denisovans. Mm-hmm. And with the Chinese dragon people, and with Homo floresiensis and the Neanderthals. There was a time when the human type was much, much more diverse.
Yes.
And we shouldn't be surprised to have cultural stories that seem to carry that memory. So I don't know why there's such a taboo around it today.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. It's just why the taboo, I don't even know. But I think a lot of it has to do with a lot of fear. I think a lot of people have been put in a fear state when it comes to their religion. And this fear prevents them from asking, looking deeper, researching deeper, trying to get a better understanding, because I think in some ways they think that they're offending their God, or that's at least what I think they believe.
Yes, I think some people construct their faith like a Jenga tower. These, I don't know if you've ever played Jenga, where you've got these little wooden blocks, you build a tower, and then you have to pull little pieces out and see if the towers still stand up.
Yeah.
And I think some people carry their faith in that way. And if you start pulling out a piece down here, like, do we have to read the Bible in a fundamentalist way? Were there giants? Was Asherah a real entity? Is Elohim really plural? They think if you pull that piece out, the whole tower's going to collapse and they won't have anything left. Whereas I think it's more helpful to have all your Jenga pieces on the table so you can pick them up one at a time and look at it and talk about it and consider what's going on there. And when you go to theological college to train for the ministry, or if you go to university and study theology as I did, they force you to put all the Jenga pieces on the table. We're going to look at them, one at a time. We're going to do different courses over 3 or 4 years so that we can look at these things individually. And it can be scary for people because they think, am I going to be able to put that tower back together again? Because I get a lot of comfort from my faith, and it seems to explain my life and experiences that I have. I don't want to be in a position where I can't put it back together again. And I think it's that kind of fear that comes in. Whereas as someone who's sort of been through that process a couple of times, because it happened when I did my honors degree in theology, and then it happened again when I started studying the Mesopotamian sources and had to go back to the Bible to re-understand what was there. There is a little bit of reframing that has to go on. It can be unsettling, but for me, it is incredibly enriching. For me, truth can only be enriching, can only be empowering, even if there's a little bit of uncertainty en route.
Right. Absolutely. This is an incredible discussion, man. This is really, really good. I'm glad we decided to do this because I'm getting a lot of incredible confirmation from you, and I'm also learning so much as well, because you're giving me a lot of key points that I know myself now. I want to go back and dig into and research and look at it and gain some of my own perspectives as well, which is important. I think everyone should be able to do that. Everyone should have the right to ask questions, to dig deeper, to not be afraid to research, and to look into what they believe in without feeling any type of punishment or anything that's going to come to harm them. I believe it's my God-given right to be able to look deeper into anything I come across.
Yes, I think so. I think there are forms of Christianity that have discouraged curiosity, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's this verse that often gets repeated, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. And you don't want to do that. There's this doctrine of the fall that says, well, your own understanding is impaired, so, better not get too far into the world of logic and reason because you're going to make a mistake. And Christians can be made very anxious rather than curious.
Yeah.
Whereas I find, especially when I read the Gospels and I try to get to the root meaning of the key words in Jesus' teaching, he's actually trying to stoke our curiosity. There's plenty in the Old Testament as well, from some of the later prophets and in the devotional writings, that would want us to be seekers, truth seekers, explorers, want us to be curious. And I think it's a shame that very often, both in Catholic and Reformed Christianity, curiosity has been discouraged, even to the point of the church pushing back on new science and new discoveries. Mm-hmm.